Hi, I'm Andrea Hines, half of the dynamic duo at Georgia Tech's Georgia Manufacturing Extension Partnership with the food and beverage team to talk to you about how to have a successful third-party audit. So Wendy and I both have experience working in food manufacturing, and I also have experience working in certification bodies, both as certification management and as an auditor prior to joining Georgia Tech. First, let's establish the key differences between a third-party audit and a regulatory inspection, because sometimes folks think that the experience they have with their state Department of Agriculture, Department of Public Health, USDA, or FDA will be similar to a third-party audit, and that's simply not the case. So regulatory inspections are required by law, and they cover basic regulatory compliance. Those inspections are performed by a government regulator, a form of law enforcement. The inspection may cover a regulation in its entirety, or it may just be a brief sample of regulations or quick direct observations. And regulatory inspections typically range from a few hours to several days. Third-party audits, however, are voluntary, and you usually go through one in order to meet customer requirements. The standards are higher than basic regulatory compliance. There are very limited exemptions based on business size, and those audits are performed by a neutral third party called a certification body. And we'll talk more about what a certification body is later. The audit involves a full review of all requirements against an audit tool, so those audits tend to be significantly longer, usually an 8-hour day to several days. As you're preparing for your first third-party audit, the first thing you'll want to do is get a copy of the audit tool. The audit tool is the actual requirements the auditor will use to perform your assessment. Some audit tools also have customer expectation manuals as a supplement. For example, Costco has a customer expectation manual in addition to their Costco GMP audit tool. You'll also want to take note of the version of the audit tool and expectation manual you're looking at in case it updates. For GFSI benchmarked audits like SQF, BRC, and FSSC 22000, these documents are published on their respective websites. Here's an image of the SQF website where you can see the Food Manufacturing Code Edition 9 is available for free download, along with an Excel version of the audit checklist. Next, you'll want to select your certification body. So a certification body, as I said, is a neutral third party that executes audits on behalf of other organizations. So for example, Costco does not perform Costco GMP audits. Costco has a list of approved certification bodies they trust to hire auditors to perform their audit on their behalf. And not all certification bodies are accepted by all organizations. So if you're going through a third-party audit for a specific customer, ask that customer for a list of their acceptable certification bodies. For select GFSI schemes, like BRC maintains a directory of certification bodies where those certification bodies are ranked, and you can view this in the BRC directory. And those rankings include customer service and compliance to BRC's expectations. This is an example of the free BRC GS directory available to anyone. You can see Intertek, a very large auditing company, has a 5-star rating, which is the highest rating available by BRC, and you can see the standards to which Intertek audits. You also can see Food Safety Net Services, or FSNS Certification and Audit, is another 5-star certification body. And there are others, including Eurofins and NSF and BioMerieux. After you've gotten your audit tool and you've selected your certification body, you'll want to perform an internal assessment of yourself against the audit tool. This is sometimes called a gap assessment. Schedule this over several days with an audit team where you can. Go through the tool line by line or the audit criteria line by line and identify any areas where your company currently doesn't comply. These are often called gaps. If you don't understand the criteria, you can ask your certification body to clarify what the requirement means. Now, your certification body is not able to also consult for you. That's considered a conflict of interest. But what they can do is potentially refer you to another consultant or simply explain what the criteria means. You also don't want to assume that criteria does not apply to your company. Ask the certification body if you believe criteria does not apply to you. Because again, these criteria are above and beyond regulatory compliance. The Georgia Manufacturing Extension Partnership can also assist with an internal assessment, sometimes called a gap assessment. Next, you'll want to close any gaps you identify. So make a list of those gaps and assign people responsible for correcting each item and a time frame for completion. Review that list as a team weekly to make sure you're on track. And once the item is corrected, review it again to verify the correction meets the audit criteria. Next, you'll want to schedule the audit with your certification body after you know you're fully prepared and have at least 30 days of record showing implementation to all of your new policies, programs, and procedures. Proactive communication with your certification body is vital. Certification bodies are typically booked several months in advance, so please be patient with their scheduling team. Complete the new customer paperwork for the certification body promptly. They need this information in order to schedule your audit appropriately and assign the correct auditor. The paperwork will include a lot of detail about your site, how many employees you have, your hours of operations, what types of products you make, and the number of HACCP plans or food safety plans. The auditor is assigned based on food process knowledge or food industry competence, not geographic location. So for example, if an auditor primarily audits the dairy industry, that auditor is likely not going to be assigned to a bakery or a produce house. But if you don't tell the certification body accurately what products you make, that certification body can't assign the correct auditor to your site. Also, the size of your operation, the square footage, the number of employees, the number of food safety plans or HACCP plans, the complexity, all impacts the duration of your audit. It's important the certification body has this information from you. They also need to understand your hours of operation. So for example, if you typically operate Monday through Friday, but in the summers, you close the plant on Fridays, you need to ensure your certification body knows that so they don't send an auditor to you a day that you're closed. If you forget to tell your certification body that your hours of operation have changed and the auditor shows up, you may still have to pay for that audit. You might have to pay for an audit twice, simply because you did not communicate with the certification body. Now, sometimes there's unexpected downtime. There are bad storms that might knock the power out. You might have a raw material delivery that is unexpectedly delayed. In those cases where you have unexpected downtime the week of your audit, call your certification body as soon as possible so they can work with you to reschedule the audit accordingly. After you've gone through your internal assessment, you've selected your certification body, you've scheduled your audit, you've closed all your gaps, you'll want to make yourself an audit guide. Now, an audit guide is simply a cheat sheet, so you can efficiently and effectively recall the information you need to show compliance to audit criteria. You'll also want to create a timeline so you know when significant changes to your system have occurred. For example, if you started preparing for an audit in January and you realized you didn't have a complaint management system and you didn't implement a complaint management system until March, you'll want to ensure the auditor understands that time frame so that the auditor, when they're auditing against the complaint management section, they don't ask for records from January or February. They ask for records from March forward when you've implemented the change. So to illustrate, this is what an audit guide could look like. So this is that Excel SQF checklist that I downloaded from SQF's website, and I made a modification. So on the left, you'll see the clause numbers. In the middle, you'll see SQF's requirements. And then on the right, I added a notes section where I wrote the notes of which policies, which records, and which logs I need to show the auditor in order to comply with Section 213 complaint management. A tool like this is helpful in multiple ways. One, it helps you as the plant stay organized. And if you and the auditor miscommunicate, if the auditor asks a question in a way you don't understand, you can say, which section are you auditing against to the auditor? And the auditor might say, I'm auditing against 2131. You can then look at your check sheet and pull, in this case, policy 10 complaint management to show your auditor. If you can prepare to this level of detail, it will make your audit more efficient. Now, as mentioned, I was an auditor for a number of years, and these are some of the things I wish clients understood, especially going into their first audit. An auditor's job is not that easy. They have to learn everything about your site in a very short period of time. And while they're learning everything about your site in a few days, they also have to write a report that's usually between 10 and 80 pages long with evidence to justify that auditor's decision-making for compliance and non-compliance against a set of criteria. Please do not ask the auditor to look the other way or make an exception for you. That's not their job. Their job is simply to audit you against a set of criteria. It is on you to prepare accordingly so you understand the criteria. On that audit report, it will include the auditor's personal name. So if your site has a recall or something bad that happens, that auditor's name is on a document associated with your plant, and that auditor can get pulled into that recall investigation. So it's not as if they just write a report and then they aren't connected to you anymore. They're connected to you for an entire year at least. So don't ask them to look the other way. Don't lie or mislead your auditor. You want trust and open communication. Do not take your frustrations with the audit criteria out on the auditor. Auditors don't write audit criteria. Auditors don't write SQF requirements, BRC requirements, FSSC requirements, GMP requirements. They just get the criteria and assess you against it. There are other ways you can give feedback if you are frustrated with audit criteria that's more effective than trying to take it out on your auditor. If you disagree with an auditor, express your concerns respectfully in the moment. Auditors need you to explain your process so they fully understand your business. When I was an auditor, I would always encourage sites in opening meeting to openly tell me if they disagree with one of my findings, because they know their policies, programs, and procedures better than me. So I might call a nonconformity because I haven't looked at their system as a whole yet. I've just seen a little piece. Or maybe I missed a line in a procedure. That back and forth communication is really important for good, thorough auditing. Also, a little hospitality goes a long way in having a pleasant audit for everyone. Now, you don't need to bribe the auditor. You don't need to go to extremes and feed them steak and lobster and caviar. But at a minimum, it would be nice if you had water available, not only for the auditor, but also your team working with that auditor. Sources of caffeine, like coffee, soda, tea, and snacks, are also appreciated, again, while not required. While your auditor will appreciate it, the company team working with that auditor also would generally appreciate some resources. Ensure the auditor has a comfortable workspace with a chair, table, or desk for a laptop, a working outlet, and access to the internet. Again, if you make these things available to your auditor, it will allow for a more efficient audit. And efficient audits are shorter audits. And as I've mentioned, people generally don't like to see an auditor show up at their facility, and they can't wait for the auditor to leave. The more efficient you make your audit, the shorter your audit will be. Also, make lunch plans early. Inform the auditor if you plan to order a group lunch, or if the auditor should make their own arrangements. In either case, the auditor will want to keep the lunch break very short in order to ensure the audit is completed efficiently. During the audit, have a minimum of 2 personnel assigned to work with the auditor through the duration. You don't want to just leave the auditor alone in a conference room with a bunch of binders. Somebody needs to stay with that auditor to answer questions and help keep the audit moving. You don't want to leave the auditor alone. Don't let the auditor wander throughout your facility. They need to have a guide so you can see what the auditor's seeing. Take notes, and where applicable, take pictures. If the auditor notices a rough weld or some sort of insanitary condition, take a picture so you can explain to your management team afterwards what the auditor saw and work toward continuous improvement. Know that the auditor will spend several hours over multiple days in your manufacturing environment observing your process. Interview employees. Perform a traceability test with mock recall. The auditor will do all of these things, so practice it with your team. The auditor will also review several days, weeks, and in some cases, months of your records. The auditor will test your metal detectors and x-rays, and the auditor will observe critical control point and/or preventive controls monitoring. So if you take all of this into account, it should allow you to feel prepared and have an efficient audit. After the audit is completed, if you believe you have grounds to appeal an auditor's finding, perhaps disagreeing with them in the audit didn't work, there are ways to appeal auditors' decisions to the certification body. Start that process the day the audit ends or the next calendar day. Do not delay. You usually don't have much time to start the appeals process. Immediately also start taking documented corrective actions to identify your root causes and implement preventive measures for any findings you agree with. Often, but not always, these documented actions will need to be submitted to your certification body. You'll also want to conduct a debrief meeting with your management team and employees so they understand how the audit went, what you learned, and any ideas you have to better prepare for next year. Then you'll want to schedule your next audit and build a plan to maintain all the systems that you've created. So if you have questions about audit criteria or want assistance with a gap assessment, subscribe to our food and beverage newsletter that comes out quarterly. It always includes some tips and tricks applicable to audit criteria, or reach out to Wendy and I directly. Here's our contact information. You can scan our virtual business card or email us. And thank you for your time today.